Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual NBC6 Voices on our Facebook and YouTube pages. I'm Jawan Strader. Well, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. Tonight, we're highlighting the stories of survival and resources for anyone who's been touched by abuse, as well as families looking to recover from or prevent future abuse. Now, consider this. In the United States, someone is sexually assaulted about every 73 seconds. Every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. Now, that adds up to more than 400,000 Americans who experience this type of crime every year. That's according to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. And in a lifetime, 1 in 6 American women and 1 in 33 American men will be the victim of an attempted or completed rape. Those numbers are all the more staggering when you consider that 3 out of 4 go unreported. Only 5 out of every 1,000 perpetrators will end up in prison. And our first guest is a sexual assault survivor. Lauren Brill is also the founder of the Unsealed. Lauren, welcome to the show. There she is. There she is. Welcome to the show, Lauren. Thank you so much for joining us. I know your story because you and I, we've spoken before, but for all those people out there that don't know, tell us your story.
When I was 16 years old, I went to a party with my 2 best friends, and unfortunately kids from another school showed up and they offered me and my friends drinks, and we accepted. And my very next memory was being naked on a bed with 2 boys I didn't know who were assaulting me. And in the middle of the assault, I fell off the bed and they just ran out of the room in a panic and just left me there, barely conscious, without my clothes and by myself.
The fact that you're sharing this story, Lauren, you've shared it over and over as you've spoken to thousands of people, especially students. How did you find the strength to keep going and to share this story?
Well, I didn't share it for a very long time. I didn't wake up the next morning and say, I was sexually assaulted. I need to go to the doctor. I need to do this. I woke up the next morning like, what the heck just happened to me? There was no clarity. There was just such an uncomfortable feeling that next morning. I can't even describe it. But I remember I drove home that morning. I remember driving home thinking that my life was never going to be the same. And I just pushed it down and repressed it for many years. I didn't tell anyone. Unfortunately, I lost 30 pounds my senior year of high school. I was being recruited to play Division I soccer, and that went out the window because I lost too much weight. And then as I got older, it wouldn't leave me, and it started to affect me in other ways. And finally, I just kind of blurted it out to my parents, or my mom first, and then later my dad. And that's when I started to heal, is when I started to talk about it. But it certainly wasn't easy. I had a boyfriend around the time that I started to open up about it, and I told him, and I got mad at him for telling his friends because I didn't drink, and he explained why I didn't drink. And so it definitely was a process. It wasn't like I was out there advocating right after it happened. It took many years, but the more I spoke up about it, the better I felt. And the more I spoke up about it, the more I realized that my story could not only hopefully prevent some sexual assaults, but also help other people heal. And so I think I felt very empowered through my truth. And that's why I'm able to speak up so much now, because it was definitely not something that I did right away. And it definitely was a process. It wasn't something that I could even process right away as a 16-year-old kid who really didn't have even much sexual experience at the time. So it definitely was a process.
Lauren, what has been the reaction from those who have heard your story, especially those that may have suppressed their own personal stories?
I've heard so many reactions. I speak at high schools a lot, high schools and colleges, and almost every school I've ever been to, a student has told me they were sexually assaulted, and they start to feel comfortable sharing their own story because they see that I'm able to do it. It's almost like it's the Me Too effect happens in small groups, right? One person shares their story and then someone says, oh, well, this is what happened to me. It creates a safe space and it creates a safe outlet. And I also try to show people that you can go through something like this and still be strong and still achieve your dreams. In fact, I tell young girls, you have a gift, and the gift is that for the rest of your life, you know exactly how strong you are because you've been through something so difficult, and you have or will come out on the other side of that. And so now in life, I always feel like, well, if I got through that, how hard is it to start a business or move to a new city or live TV? Nothing really can compare to what I went through when I was 16. So I feel like unstoppable. So those are kind of the messages I try to get across to kids. And I've just received so much positive feedback. And it's not just women. I've heard a lot from boys, whether it be they were molested as children or by their babysitters, or other people who told me that their mothers were affected by sexual assault. One boy came up to me and said, because of you, I understand my mother a little bit better now, and I think I can help her more now. And so that was really powerful. I was a sportscaster. So one athlete, when I shared my story initially, he tweeted out that he would always support me, and he reached out to me and said the same thing happened to his mother. So I just would hear all these stories. It kind of created more of a conversation, and hopefully I can show people that for people that are still struggling with their own silence, that they can speak up, they can be empowered, and their truth is powerful, and their truth will help them feel that power.
And you talked about how you were able to move on and how it helped you to move on when you started talking about that. So I want to know about what you started, the Unsealed. Explain this, because you were a sportscaster,
Yeah,
and then,
my
but then you
whole
went and did something different.
So my whole dream when I was a little girl was to become a sportscaster. And I honestly think that that dream helped me heal, because I didn't want anything to get in the way with that, of my dream of becoming a sportscaster. So for example, if I wanted to be a sportscaster, I had to figure out a way to walk in a dark parking lot at night. And as a sexual assault survivor, walking at night in a dark parking lot is terrifying. My heart used to race. I used to bite my lip and walk really fast, and games were at night. So I had to figure it out. And my career forced me to face a lot of my fears. It forced me to push myself out of my comfort zone so many times. And then I started telling all these stories about all these different people who had incredible stories of overcoming adversity and facing their truth, whether it be about sexual assault or something else. And their stories really started to give me courage. And then I shared my story in the form of an open letter, and it went viral around the country. And I thought to myself, I felt so empowered. I felt free. I felt like I could finally breathe. I thought, what if I could take my ability to write and tell a story, which I do all the time, or I did all the time as a sportscaster, and lend it to other people's voices and other people's stories. So I took everything I loved about sportscasting, the strength of the human spirit, storytelling, interviewing people, and I created my own company and combined it with my love for advocacy and speaking truth and all these different issues that I'm passionate about, like sexism and sexual assault and racism and just equality across the board. And so what I created is called the Unsealed, and it is a website, a digital media company, where we tell stories in the form of open letters, and I help people write those letters. And the letters are all inspirational, and they're all about different issues, some sexual assault, some about racism, some about chasing your dreams. They're all different, but they all have a positive message, and they're all meant to create a level of compassion, make people be compassionate for other people's situations, create more awareness in the world, and also create more love and unity. I like to say, when I was assaulted, those guys didn't know who I was. I still don't know who assaulted me, but they didn't know who I was, but they didn't see me as a soccer player, or a girl who was tutoring her friends, or a girl who loved her parents. They didn't see me as a person. And so what I like to say is, through the Unsealed, I'm unsealing humanity to make sure that we can all see the humanity in each other all the time. So that doesn't.
Amen. Amen, Lauren. And I know a lot of us are very proud of you and what you're doing and the message that you're sending. Also, I want folks to know that are watching this right now that you see at the bottom of your screen. We want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence here with Voices, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656-HOPE. That number is 1-800-656-HOPE. We're going to keep it there throughout the show. I want to make sure if any of you have a problem, any of you, as you heard from Lauren saying that you're holding back, you're suppressing it, you don't want to come out about it, you don't want to share your story just yet, there is a safe space for you. You heard from Lauren. And Lauren, I wanted to ask you, as far as those that suppress it, what do you want other survivors out there to know that are dealing with sexual assault or sexual abuse?
I don't think suppressing it was ever a choice. I don't think I chose to suppress it. I think it's something your body naturally does. But I think I just want other survivors to know that it's not their fault, they're not to blame, and that they're powerful and they're strong, and they can be okay. They can be healthy, they can move past this. But yeah, I don't think people choose to be silent. I think your brain almost protects you and tries to, and then you deal with it when you're ready. And so I think everyone has their own timetable to heal. Everyone heals in their own way, and I just encourage people to explore those outlets and that make them feel better. For me, writing made me feel better, which is why I gravitated toward the Unsealed. But if it's art, if it's music, if it's conventional therapy, find that coping mechanism, find that way that allows you to express yourself, and it will allow you to find your power again, and then it'll show you that you're unstoppable, because you are.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And you are too, as a matter of fact. And I want to thank you for sharing that story. I want to bring in another guest, Wakumi Douglas. She's the co-founder and executive director of Soul Sisters Leadership Collective. And she's joining us on the show to talk a little bit more about Soul Sisters and the Leadership Collective. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here, and I really appreciate you all having us. Soul Sisters Leadership Collective's work is focused on interrupting cycles of violence, the topic of our conversation today, and poverty that are faced by girls and non-binary youth who are systems involved, meaning these are young people who are having interactions with the legal system, the child welfare system, systems to address homelessness and mental health, and also are in the public schools. Our work is really meant to address the really staggering issues that girls and non-binary youth of color in particular are facing disproportionately as it comes to violence, and in particular sexual violence. And there is a really a wonderful study that we often reference, a wonderful and sad study by Georgetown University that really helps us to illustrate the problem that girls are, particularly Black girls, are facing when it comes to violence. This is a 2017 study done by Georgetown Law Center that talks about how when compared to white girls of the same age, Black girls are found to need less nurturing, less protection. These are the perceptions that folks have of our girls, that they know more about adult topics and they know more about sex. And so a lot of researchers are really helping us to understand the disproportionate experiences as it comes to adults' perception of girls that causes our girls, particularly girls of color, to be victimized, and also to understand the ways in which folks don't believe our girls. Because if we have research that's telling us that Black girls need less nurturing and less protection, then it's highly likely that when a Black girl says, I've been assaulted, I've been sexually assaulted, I've been harmed, often adults who are responsible for her care are less likely to believe her. Soul Sisters exists to create healing spaces for girls, to do advocacy for them when adults don't believe them and when young people need us to have their back. And also to continue to raise awareness about the unique disproportionalities of girls of color and non-binary youth of color. We don't have a lot of research out there that tells us about the experiences of trans and gender nonconforming youth and their experiences with sexual violence. We know that there is some research that indicates they're more likely to experience this violence. Soul Sisters exists to interrupt that, again, through youth development, healing spaces, education, and advocacy.
And I want to ask you, what are some of the ways, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the ways that young women are impacted after abuse?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a myriad, and our previous guest spoke to some of that. Trauma is real, and post-traumatic stress is real. Young people often can disconnect from school, isolate ourselves. We can disconnect from family and friends. We see young people who are more inclined to engage in drinking and substance use. We see young people who are sometimes more inclined to engage in risky sexual behavior. We see family conflict and strife that gets started, particularly when people don't believe young people when they come forward. And so there can be lots of interruptions in young people's lives. But like the previous guest shared, young people are also incredibly resilient. And what Soul Sisters does, and what we believe at our core, is that these experiences of pain and hardship are the exact reason why we need the leadership of these exact survivors to help interrupt these cycles of violence. And so we believe in the leadership capacity of young people and their ability to educate their communities around these issues, to organize around these issues and do community organizing and policy advocacy. We believe in those activities and creating art and entrepreneurship. We believe in those activities as incredibly healing and as routes into young people's healing as well. So the capacity, young people have the capacity not just to suffer, right? And not just to be in pain, but to transform that pain into ways to transform our communities so that we have less violence. And that's the work that we're doing with young people.
And Wakumi, tell me about your trip to Tallahassee last week.
Oh, wow. Yes. Okay. So we did a small group of us went to Tallahassee for our 4th annual Black Girls Day at the Capitol event. It has become a highlight of many of particularly the Black and women of color legislators up in Tallahassee who are representing for our communities. And it's an opportunity for girls and non-binary youth, many of whom, again, are survivors, to set their agenda for policy in the state of Florida and to say, hey, we have a stake in what happens in Tallahassee during legislative session as well. And these are the issues that we care about. And so the young people went up there to share about their concerns about some particular pieces of legislation that were up on the floor. And it was a really fantastic opportunity for youth to advocate.
All right. Well, Wakumi, thank you so much. And I love what you are doing, what Soul Sisters is doing. So thank you so much for sharing with us all the great things that you're doing to try to basically enhance the lives of so many young women out there. And we need to protect them. We need to do everything in our power to protect our future queens. No doubt about that. So thank you. And someone else here, Dr. Delvina Thomas. Now, she's a very familiar face to our viewers. She's been on Voices since the very beginning, and we've stuck with her. That is our girl. And what I love about Dr. Delvina Thomas is that she breaks everything down for us and for you out there as far as the help that you may need. And again, we have some of that help listed in the hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. But talking to anyone about sexual abuse is very uncomfortable. So that's why we have Dr. Delvina Thomas. She's joining us now to talk a little bit more about discussing it with the children, because, of course, this is tough. So when should parents start having that talk, that conversation, Dr. Delvina?
Yeah, you have to start having the talk as soon as your child is old enough to be able to identify that they have body parts, right? So when you start talking to your child about their genitalia, that little girls, they have vaginas, and little boys, they have penises, and you start telling them that no one should be touching you in these places. These are forbidden areas. So you have to teach your children young, and you also have to encourage them to come forward regardless of what anyone may say to them. You have to tell them nothing bad is going to happen to you if you come forward and you talk to me about something that someone is doing to you that hurts, that makes you feel badly, that's touching you in any of these places that mommy and daddy has forbidden. So I believe as soon as possible, as early as possible, to let them know, because you know from the statistics that you shared, Jawan, that there's probably about 33%, 34% of abused children are abused less than the age of 10. So you have to start early. You have to let them know about these evils that lurk out there.
And I think it's every parent's worst nightmare, because I know it's mine. And so that's why I like to have this conversation with someone like yourself, someone who's an expert in this field. So what can parents like myself, what can we do to try to arm our children with information to prevent them from being abused?
So you cannot trust everybody. You can't trust family members, because a majority of the perpetrators are members of the family. You cannot trust everyone with your child. So do not, and you have to set certain rules too. Don't allow little girls or little boys, because sometimes boys are dismissed. Sometimes we don't think about little boys being sexually abused or being molested. Little boys are abused and molested as well. So you have to talk to your little girls, your little boys, about not sitting on family members or a friend of the family, not sitting on their lap, not allowing that person to hug and caress them in a certain way. And you may have to demonstrate to your child what all of those things mean. And I cannot emphasize enough, don't allow your child to spend a lot of time with people you don't know well. You should not allow your child to stay the night with, students, families of students that they attend school with, just because your child comes home and says, my friend at school is having a sleepover, may I go? The answer should be no, because if you don't know that family, you haven't spent any time with that family, you don't know anything about that family's background, you don't know who will be inside of the home. And so you have to set boundaries there so that you're just not allowing your child to be with any and everyone.
That's so true. And you know what? There's another myth out there that we want to discuss with you, and it's that only women are victims of sexual assault and sexual abuse. But last month, a young man in Miami was abducted and assaulted. And you remember the video, it played out across South Florida. And it showed that victim basically pretty much almost crawling for help after being allegedly sexually assaulted and abused and shot. Luckily, there was a hero nearby that was able to help him and guide him to safety. But can you address the myth? Can you address this myth?
Yeah, it's absolutely a myth. The statistics show that 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted and 1 in 6 men. And if you gather data from other populations, such as the military, right, there's a lot of sexual assault in the military. Jawan, you know that, I'm a veteran. 38 men are sexually assaulted every day in the military. And so sexual abuse and sexual assault and molestation occurs in young men and boys. And unfortunately, they're ashamed to come forward because we as a society have not encouraged them to come forward and seek help. Sometimes they're ridiculed for coming forward. Sometimes they're made fun of and they're told, oh, you're less of a man because you're complaining that someone touched you. No one should be allowed to touch your daughter or your son who are underage. That's considered statutory rape. And you've seen that a lot in social media recently, a lot of men who have come forward and said that they were sexually assaulted by women, sexually assaulted by men. So it's definitely a myth that sexual assaults only occur in women. They occur in men and young boys as well. You got to protect your young boys and your men also.
And my last question for you, Dr. Delvina, before we let you go, is what resources are available for men and women who have been abused?
So for men and women, you can first start by contacting your primary care physician if you don't already have an association with a mental health professional. I've mentioned before on previous shows that because of the Affordable Health Care Act, there are provisions for people to go directly to a mental health professional and not require a referral from their primary care doctor. So if you have insurance, call your insurance, go online with your insurance, put in your zip code, and they will bring up a list of mental health professionals. You can also Google has everything. You can put in certain things that you have an interest for, such as therapists who treat trauma, therapists who treat sexual assault victims. You can also go on NAMI, which is National Alliance of Mental Illness.org. That's NAMI.org. You can also see your primary care if you don't know where to go. And if you don't have insurance, a community mental health center is located in almost every major city, every major metropolitan area. You can go onto their website, or you can call them, pull up the number on Google and call the Community Mental Health Center and request an appointment with the therapist.
Dr. Delvina Thomas, thank you so much. We always love your insight, and it's always a pleasure to have you on. You educate us on so many different issues. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's our show for tonight. We hope you got something out of this very important conversation. And if you need help, you see the number on your screen. That is the National Sexual Assault Hotline number. It's 1-800-656-HOPE. And you can watch this program this Saturday morning on NBC6 at 9 a.m. when we will also talk about this week's high-profile incidents involving Black drivers across the country. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Let us know what you thought about the show. I'm at Jawan NBC6. And you can also message us on social media if you have a story idea. And before we go, remember, education is the key to success. If you believe, you will succeed. We'll be back here next week. Have a great week.